Well, hello, Juanita.
Hello, it's so good to be here with you, Monica.
Hi, same here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I was like, when I was inviting you, I was like, should be she part of the opening session with a bunch of people? I want her just for me, like just
I love that.
I was
I wish I could
selfish.
have you just for me.
So
I
to
like
be honest, I was like, no, I want Juanita, just me and her talking here, not a bunch of people. And she only has like a 1 minute of intervention. No, I don't like that. You already did that. So
this.
yeah, now it's just us here. It's so good to have you in this space. Thank you.
Oh, it is so good to be here and to be invited again. There's something about the cycles of being able to come back and come back. I think this is my third time.
Yes, it's your turn.
And so I'm really excited about seeing, who are we now? You
I know.
know, who are
Yeah.
you? Who am I? Who are us as community, the larger community, in this time of great transformation?
It is true. So actually, we're celebrating the 5th year anniversary of
Oh,
Grandma's March.
nice.
I can't believe it is already 5 years, and you were
Yes.
part of the first one. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Oh my
definitely,
gosh,
yeah,
yes. So maybe it's more than my
yeah.
memory. It's so funny because it's like time just kind of goes, doesn't it? I was
It's
just talking to someone that next year I will have been in my business as Zuzu for 20 years. And
wow.
so time just, you start doing what you're up to, and it's easy to just turn around and like, oh my goodness, 5 years has passed, right? Or 20 years have passed. What a blessing.
What a
Yeah.
blessing. It's true. And I keep doing it. And every year, every year when March comes, it's like, oh my God, no, I cannot make it
Yes.
happen this year. I'm too
Yes.
busy. Life is crazy. But it just calls me. And when I start preparing it, even if it is 1 week before it happens,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
just, and it just need to show up and
Hmm.
it will happen. The people that I contact immediately say yes, and it's
Yeah.
so easy and it flows.
Well, and
So
it's interesting because you reached out to me, and the week before, I was like, "Is Monica doing that again?" I even like looked it up online, like so. It's so funny
yeah,
because it's,
and
it's
people
in
start
my
asking
system.
me during this
Yeah,
time. So it's like, okay, I know
yeah,
it's time, so
yes.
I have to do
We
it.
call you
Nothing,
out, call you
they
out, call you
call me
in.
out always.
Come on, we're
Yeah.
doing this together.
There is no way to hide. I know there is, yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm so happy. And the theme of the year is actually, let me show it here, is the nurturing essence of home, water, and wisdom. And yeah, there is a lot of connection to definitely with the grandmothers and the wisdom, but I always intuit in a very intuitive way try to understand what's going on in the field, and of
Yeah.
course especially what's going on in my life and how can I connect
Yeah.
all that and what messages I'm receiving. And the hurricane came last year, my house got flooded, water came to transform, and it made me reflect a lot about, well, what is home and what is water, and what what the messages that home and water and wisdom are bringing to us, and not only me, but whatever happens to me is happening to all of us.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
believe that. So it's like what water wants to say, and what
Mm.
homes represents. And I've been reflecting a lot of, I even have this little home, and it is in the watercolor
Oh, yeah.
here.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
found it. Yeah, I was in Turkey last week, and when I saw it, it's like, this is it. I need it. I need
Yeah.
it, and I will, put it when I talk about it to, like bring the energy, because it's so interesting. Like in all the recordings I've been doing, it represents so many things to different people, but at the same time, it's the same essence.
Yeah.
So, of course, when I was thinking, who should I invite? I thought, of course, Juanita. Juanita is the water woman.
I'm a water woman.
Yes. And not only water, but fire and wind and all the
Fire,
elements
wind, and water.
represented. And yeah, and when I was together with you, the feeling of community, the feeling of a home, that feeling of community, when everything happened to me and my husband, having a community and not having a physical house, but being able
Yes.
to have that community that we hosted us, helped us, that is like that's what we need.
Yeah.
That is home. That is the real home.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I
Yeah.
guess that's why we're here today,
Yeah.
and yeah, I will love your insights and sharing around
Yeah.
this theme. And of course, yeah, this is just
Well,
a conversation
I
between.
I think I'll take them because you and I were talking a couple minutes ago, and kind of in order of home, water, and wisdom. The home piece is interesting to me because we were talking about the hearth of the home and the fire of a home.
Yes.
There's one of the traditions years ago was that the new wife of a new home, would bring embers from the fire of her home, her mother's home, to
Mm,
start the fire in her new home. And it would be the fire that you kept going, that you didn't let go out. You
good.
just bank it at night and then you used it the next day to cook. And so it was like the hearth of the home. It was the essence of your home.
Mm,
And fire, because I run a program called Fire and Water. Fire and
yes.
water together means a lot to me, and that essence of what is home. And in these days, right now, my two children are in my home. My daughter, who's 20, and my son, who's 23, have moved back home for
Yeah.
various reasons. And there's been a new kind of nesting that I found myself doing.
Oh,
There's been this call in this time of transformation of like everything in my home wants to be touched and wants me to decide, does it stay or does it go? In transformation and stepping into the new, oftentimes you have to let go of the old and to invite the new in, or to even assess, nope, this one needs to stay. This is still useful on the journey,
there
right?
you go. Yeah.
And so that home tending, that fire, the tending to the fire, right? The essence of home out here, like you're saying, your friends and your community and who holds you, and home internal, like what
Yes.
matters to me
Mm,
and who I am and what I'm supposed to be showing up and doing in the world.
mm.
Um, the other piece that I'll say is the water.
Yes.
And like you said, according to the Dagra medicine wheel of West Africa and Burkina Faso, I'm a water spirit. And so the
Mhm.
medicine I carry is the medicine of forgiveness and reconciliation in the world.
Mm,
Water reconciles things. It can cleanse out things. I'm feeling it a lot in these days in the grief. There's so much transition happening,
yes.
whether it's physical transition, spiritual transition, emotional transition. It's still, things are moving, things are leaving and being hospiced out, and new things are coming and being midwifed in.
Mm,
And there's lots of grief with that. And we're not always communities that know how to grieve well. Grief requires community. We need the water. If we don't know how to grieve and let go of what no longer serves us, there's no room for the new to step in.
mm.
And we are in a time that we're called to bring up something new. I was thinking Carolyn Mace, she said several years ago this piece about, we're a culture that's stuck in the revolution. And she said, it's time to move out of the revolution and move into the involution, to stop
Oh,
revolting against what we don't want and start creating and showing up for that which we do. There's so much attention
mhm.
that's put on people who maybe don't believe in the same way that we do, or who aren't valuing life. And I actually want attention to put on the other ones, not who they are, but who are we in these times? Because we have a choice, and love always wins. There's so much fear that I'm feeling around, and I just keep telling people, fear doesn't live in the present moment. Fear always is rooted in the past or the future. But in the present moment, when I'm really present, I'm never afraid. And so it's a sign to get present, right? And so the fire and water together. And then the wisdom piece, I'll take. I run a 16-month leadership rites of passage cohort for adults,
Mhm.
because I think we have forgotten the wisdom. We've forgotten about the elders and the importance that elders are in our culture, and helping us to step into our own unique wisdom. I think we are our most underutilized resource. I think we could solve every issue on the planet by initiating all the adults, and that most of us are just growing older. We're not growing up. And it's a time for wisdom. It's a time for wise leadership. I always say we don't have a lack of leaders, we have a lack of wise leaders. Leadership just means people are following you. It says nothing about where you're taking them.
Right.
And so, what is each of our responsibility in that, and stepping into our own wise wisdom? You know, the wind that you offered up as part of me and part of what I carry is I was gifted in a birthing ceremony the name Wind Warrior. And I
Hmm.
was really confused because
Yeah,
I'm like,
because where's
I'm
the water?
water. I'm like, I'm water. Why am I getting wind? Right? Like, and
I love it. Yeah.
but I'm just sitting with it, trying to learn, like, what is it trying to teach me?
Yeah.
And I was directed online to look up the Orisha Oya. And
Mm-hmm.
Oya is the goddess of the fire, the wind, and the water. And I got it
All
all.
together.
That's the energy.
Oh,
And
yeah. True.
Oya, she, um, it's said that she doesn't just rearrange the furniture; she might like burn the whole house down, right?
Oh
During
my God. Well,
transformation.
she came
But she's
here.
kind of like that fierce, right? And I actually found her and got, oh, that's why the wind is here. Right before I was invited to go to Brazil to speak at the National Diversity Conference in Brazil. And, I'm really clear she brought me there.
I'm sure.
And when I was there, I also got to visit with a samba group. And it just so happens this group opens every kind of rehearsal and dance, training together with a song to Oya. And so, they find you,
She
the
was
spirits, and
welcoming you. Yes.
welcoming me in, inviting me in. Oh, and the night before, I should add, is I went to an African religious ceremonies in the mountains of Brazil. And I didn't have a translator till the very end. And my translator asked me if I wanted a reading from the priestess there. And I said yes. And so she's talking to her. And the priestess says to me, not knowing this connection, well, knowing, but not knowing, right? This connection to Oya. She
Of
says,
course.
Oya has plans for you. You just don't trust enough. And I said, what the
What?
heck? I'm in the freaking mountains of Brazil. Give me a moment, right? We're in these human bodies. And sometimes I think the ancestors and the spirits forget that it takes us, we're here, right? So
Yes.
it may take us a minute to step into those things.
Oh my God. Where in Brazil was this? Was in Bahia? No.
I was in Belo Horizonte
Okay.
is
Yes. Yes.
where the conference was, and
Yes.
then I kind of went little places from there. I didn't get to Bahia, and I need to go
Yeah.
back. I really
No,
need to be
I
there.
know. I know.
You
We have
know,
to go together because
we
yeah.
do. Yes, yes, definitely. I would
Yeah,
love
we
that.
have to talk about this. Yes, I know. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe we'll do a trip and invite others and hold some
I
space.
know, right? Yes,
Yes.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
To meet these energies, and because they're very strong in there, you really feel
Yes.
them. Yeah,
Oh,
especially
yes.
in yeah. Oh my God. Yeah,
Yes. Well,
yeah.
I knew when I was invited to come and give the keynote that the ancestors were who were calling me in. I didn't know what I
Mhm.
was going to say. Like I was there for 5 days before I was there for 10 days total, but 5 days before the conference, and I just knew they would teach me. They would tell me what they wanted from me.
Mm. It's
Yeah.
so amazing. Well, actually, I was called to be there, to go there. I lived there for 12 years, and yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I found that I was also, well, that my Orisha was water, which is Yemanja, and
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
is very strong. I learned there that Yemanja's day is the same day my mother was born, so
Yes.
another
Oh,
connection.
Oya's day is the day my
Yes,
mother died.
really. Wow.
Yes.
There you
Yep.
go. That's so amazing. And
And
then I
Oya is
went
like the
to
goddess of the cemeteries too, is one of the things. And yeah.
right, right. Yeah, yes. So definitely is they're calling us all the time. And
Yes.
yes, and well, we need to go back to
Yeah.
Brazil.
Yes. I know. I've it was so mm, I knew when I was going to Brazil, especially it was the second ever National Diversity Conference in Brazil.
Hmm.
And for them to invite a dark-skinned African American woman to give the keynote, I knew there was something significant about that, and that the gift I was bringing was my voice.
Hmm.
And not surprisingly enough, while I was there, I lost my voice.
No kidding.
And I remember like everybody, the culture such a generous culture. It's like everybody's trying to help me, like giving me everything right?
Yeah,
From like a scarf to dried ginger to
yeah,
like
honey
all this
ginger.
stuff, like a medicine, a hot toddy soup. So, they just kept like gifting me these things. And I remember um I called a friend because I was like, I just need some rest, right? And then what struck me was, in the African culture, when
Mhm.
someone gets sick, it's the whole villages, they're carrying it for the whole
Mm.
village to tend to. And I remember asking myself, these people have such generosity and they're tending to me and I'm frustrated. Like, what's that about for me that I come from a culture that this giving and this collective holding would make me frustrated, that like I didn't know how to receive in that way,
Wow.
you know? And so learning like how not only how do we be generous in giving,
Mm.
but a part of that I think is being generous in receiving and really allowing people to give to us. Because when we know that we're worth it, we can know that they're worth it.
Mm. It's true. And you were talking about Africa, and it's so interesting because we were doing the opening session earlier this morning. That is probably going to go live later today. And somebody brought that Africa is like the home of all of us, and
Yes.
it's
Yeah,
like no, it is literally
it
we all
is.
come
It's
from
the
there.
birthplace of all of us.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that today it's like we are as a planet, let's say, we're being called to reconnect to that motherland, and she even
Yes.
say that's like our grandmotherland. And
Yes.
that is so interesting because for many years it's like no, we don't want this, we want to
Yes.
ignore it. Oh,
Yes.
and now it's like we're being called to
Yes.
that. And it's interesting because you come from there, you bring that energy. Yeah, what
Yeah.
is your insights around
Yeah,
that?
so a couple of things that I say. One of the reasons that I use the Dagara medicine wheel in my
Yes.
work for fire and water, and I'm getting I'm getting clearer and clearer that I need to integrate it more and more as we're doing it,
Mm.
because we look to everywhere for medicine. We look to East Indian, we look for Indigenous Indian, we look for South American, we look to all these places and Chinese medicine, except for Africa.
Africa, you're right.
And
No.
someone says, you can't really thrive while still hating your mother.
Wow.
And so that's that's Black women.
It's true.
And this culture, like, as I'm in the US, and one of the
Mhm.
things that's really clear that's happening is so much of what's happening here is because of race. It's because of people of color and not, you know, seeing us as equal, I'll say.
I know.
And so for me, it's like, how do we bring and how do we start to appreciate the medicine that comes from the continent of Africa?
Hmm.
How do we, one of the things with this last cohort we really talked about is, what does it mean to have cultural reverence? What does it mean to really get that when you're coming through this program that is rooted in the Dagara medicine wheel, that it becomes part of your lineage? Well, I
Hmm.
won't say, let me rephrase that. It's already part of your lineage.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Um, but you get brought into it, where then the more that you know and connect, the more responsibility you have for carrying it.
Hmm.
And I think this piece around that I've been in question around cultural lineage is connected to us not understanding elders and wisdom too, and why it's important. Because if we don't really get that we can't take ourselves someplace we haven't been, we don't always have reverence for the elders who show up.
Hmm.
There's a way in which I think that we lack, and largely in our culture, we lack a cultural reverence. We lack the understanding that even when you meet an elder, to be curious about how is it that they want to be held? What are the rules of communication, even from their culture and where they come from?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
don't just jump in and put our foot in our mouth, right? There's a woman who I love, who I was with a gathering with an elder from her name, an elder Anolia, who's from Angola, who was here visiting, and Betsy, a friend of mine, we were going into ritual, and Mother Anolia was going to support us in the ritual. And what Betsy asked the night before is, Grandma Anolia, she says, I want to bring you a gift to thank you for what you're doing. What would be appropriate? So even to ask what would be appropriate,
Ah,
that's
beautiful.
a cultural
Yes.
reverence, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so how do we lean more and more into that, to learning and curiosity instead of going and thinking we know, or thinking when we're interacting with other cultures that that we could even know with knowing somebody, even knowing somebody for 2 days, right? How do we continue to like open and learn like what's appropriate here? How
Hmm.
do I show up with reverence? How do I honor what's being called in this moment?
Hmm. Tell me more about. I recall seeing something you post about this gathering,
Yeah.
like of elders and this
Yes.
woman. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
You brought it, and like what happened in that? How you all
Yeah.
got connected? I'm just curious because these are
Yeah.
spaces where this magic and all the ancestors are being called and the energy. Wow, I just
Yeah.
can
So
imagine. Yeah.
last June, I hosted a
Uh-huh.
gathering called the Wisdom Keepers Gathering.
Mm.
And I invited wisdom keepers from around the world to come. And it
Uh-huh.
ended up being, we had a Lakota elder, we had an elder from New Zealand, we had um, an elder from Kenya, one from Canada. We had a gentleman who attended who was born in Iran, and so it was this people from all these different continents who showed up
Wow.
to be at this Wisdom Keepers gathering. And we were together from Wednesday to Sunday, but Saturday we opened it up to the larger community and just the elders hosted different conversations because we thought we'll have them here. We should give a little moment, but that wasn't the main purpose. The main purpose for me was what changes just by us knowing each other
Mm.
and by us resting. So I had two main focuses: connection and rest.
Hmm.
And, sometimes that's really hard for elders because, especially so many of us are holding our own communities.
Yeah.
And so we don't always know how to rest.
Hmm.
Someone calls and we just say yes and show up. Or even like, I think one of the things that was a little strange for some people is I was clear this was not a program. We were together being together.
Hmm. Oh, I guess it got frozen. Okay.
All right. We had an intermission there because my Wi-Fi dropped. But so I was talking about the Wisdom Keepers gathering and this place of what is it, what changes in us was my question
Hmm.
as wisdom keepers just by knowing each other and being in relationship.
Hmm.
And how do we lean into the space of rest and care so that when we are um, showing up and holding people in our communities, that it doesn't come from a mostly empty cup, that it's that piece about put the oxygen mask on yourself first.
Yes. Yes.
And what I noticed, we were from a Wednesday evening to a Sunday afternoon, and I actually don't think it was enough time for us. I think that we're
Really?
so used to going, going, going. I mean, that some of us, there were people who were still online in the middle of the night working with people back in their communities. And I'm like, no, you're supposed to be resting. And so like how do we allow space to hold each other? There's a difference in how we can hold each other as peers than there is as a mentor, elder, and a mentee, or a person that's being eldered. There's
Hmm.
different levels of responsibility. If I'm being eldered, the responsibility is on the elder is more on the elder who's holding me. If I'm eldering, the responsibility is more on me. If I'm with a peer, it's a different level. We're not responsible for, but responsible to each other,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know?
It's
And so there's a
different.
different way of holding that. And so really playing with that. And I was also playing with the whole question of, what's the difference between teachers and guides and elders?
Hmm.
Because I think that we confuse it. I think we think if a person's a really good teacher or guide, sometimes we think they're an elder and they're not. And then we get really disappointed because they can't hold all of us, or they can't hold, what we think they should be able to. And what I came up with is I think it's because teachers, I believe, are responsible to the topic.
Mm-hmm.
Guides are responsible for the journey, and
Okay.
elders are responsible for you, to
Hmm.
put you first.
Yes.
And elders are often teachers and guides, but teachers and guides aren't always elders. And we're not really clear on that,
Mm-mm.
you know?
Hmm. Wow. And you're right, we're not clear on that. And especially in that society, which also we have lots of teachers and guides, but elders are
Yeah.
set, like we
Yes.
put them aside, right? And
Yes.
what is
And
the
especially
role?
when we prioritize knowledge over
Right.
wisdom, you
That's
know?
another thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Certificates over wisdom or things
Yeah.
like that over
Yes.
wisdom. Yes.
Definitely.
That's the other mistake we do. And how this connection happened? How did you manage to connect with these people from so many different places?
Yeah.
It was just random, or how? Just
Well,
curious. Yeah.
yeah, I think some of it was invitation only.
Uh-huh.
And so it started with people that I know. And
Okay. Makes
then
sense.
other people who I really, value their opinion and what they hold. It went from, who is it that they thought this person needs to be invited in,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I
Yes.
was clear it wasn't something that I plan to do every year, but it is
Got
something that I think is either 2 or 3 years. Like there's a rhythm of the calling together, like
it.
a gathering of how do we come together and just really hold each other and feed each other and support each other, um, and not to have any product. I think we get so stuck on produce.
Mhm.
One of the things that
Alright.
that the whiteness has and has held, and when I say whiteness, I don't mean just for white people. I mean, like,
No, I
um,
get it.
is
Yes.
that everything has to have a product or a tangible outcome. And I remember the day after those, I invited 3 people who could come and just bear witness to the journey. And the day after, someone had spoke about, well, I can take, as witnessing, I can take the information and create a book about the beginning and what happened here. And I'm like, I don't know. And again, it's because it's like, we don't even know what happened there yet.
Right.
It's like we don't know. And so and that's not what I invited people into.
There
And
you
so
go.
to really get, just because there's no product doesn't mean there's no value,
You're right.
you
Mm,
know? And that's the certificate thing, right? We want to make a certificate for everything.
mm, mm.
And I'm just so resistant to that. I mean, I give a certificate for fire and water when people have completed it, but it's kind of like, you completed the journey. It's a celebration of what you
There you
did, but
go.
it's not like the certificate doesn't say you can go out and do anything, right?
No,
I'm
right.
not like
Yeah, now you can get a
certifying you
job and
to
yeah.
run a fire and water, right? I'm just saying that you've gone through this, your own self-healing journey, and we've
Yes,
bared witness to this. And how
right.
wonderful is that?
There you go. Yes. Yes. How different it is. And you're right. I was talking recently to a friend that she is actually in France, and she's gonna get some months of like out of her job, like a license, something
Yes,
like that. And she was
yeah,
worried, like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with all this free time. I'm worried.
yeah,
I'm started to get like all this
yeah,
anxiety, because it's like I feel I need to be productive. And
yeah,
people, they don't know, like you were talking about resting. We don't
yes,
know how to rest anymore
yes.
without the guilt, and
Well,
we for
I think we use the guilt as an excuse because what we're really
right.
running from is feeling. Because if you slow down and rest, you have to feel,
Mm, mm.
And I've been taught by one of my elders, Fanshan Shur, who actually will be 90 years old this year.
Wow.
I know, that shame, blame, and guilt are not emotions. They're actually where we go to hide from emotions.
Mm.
And often the emotion is deep grief and sadness. We'll often take the shame, blame, and guilt because in lieu of taking responsibility.
There you
You
go.
know? But it's like when we're a part of something, we're a part of it, right? So we're part of the wound and the solution, the healing. And so stepping into our own responsibility for it, the ability to respond is what we're looking for. But often taking the shame, blame, or guilt keeps us from taking responsibility. We still hear politicians and everybody doing it all the time. I did do it and I'm so sorry, but it's not really like, so what are you going to do different? Right? That's taking the ability to respond to it. And so whenever I'm in a room and I hear shame, blame, or guilt come up, I ask, what are you trying not to feel?
You're right.
And like I said, often it's just deep grief and sadness. We don't know how to do grief. We don't know how to do sadness. And until you empty out what you don't want, there's no room for what you do want to come in.
Yeah, and when you talk about that, I think about like how water help us through that, because the tears are there for that. To grieve, right?
The water actually carries.
Yes.
It carries out what needs to be released.
Yes.
So there's room for the new. But until you empty out what you don't want, there's no room for the new to come in.
It's true. Yeah, you need to grieve and, let it out, let it go, and clean it out so the new things come. Yeah. But we don't,
The other thing I think is we think we have to know, like I always say, we think we have to know what we're grieving and releasing to release it. And we don't. Like this, our brain thinks we have to figure it all out. No, you don't have to figure it out to release that shit. Like just let it go. Like, if the grief is coming, my prayer is often when I feel the grief coming through me, help me not block this. Help me just let it go through me, because I can let it go and not know what it is.
I know, but then it will get
waiting
stuck
to try to
somewhere.
figure it out first. I can block that process.
You're right.
Yes. Yeah. And we often block grief because we think that grief requires suffering.
It's true.
And so we want to avoid the grief, but grief isn't suffering. Grief can be just sad. The suffering is the resistance to the grief. It's not the grief itself. If there's no resistance, there's not suffering. You just let it flow through you. And then it can be very sad. It can be really deep sadness in the process, but it's not suffering.
No. It can feel like very releasing. And I don't know. And also is a moment where you feel very present. Like, because you're there. You're allowing yourself to feel something and actually do something with it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I always say, I think one of the biggest misconceptions around grief is we think we all grieve differently. I don't think that's true. I think that grief is the same for all of us, but that story that we all grieve differently gives us permission to avoid the grief. We all avoid grief differently. We don't all grieve differently. It's that resistance. It's like holding on or doing something else, because the grief is just letting the emotion flow through you and letting it go. And ultimately that's the same for all of us. We just have to let it flow through us and let it go. Yes. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't, again, that process of getting to that point can't be different for all of us.
Yes.
But that's the resistance to the grief. It's not the grief itself.
So what is, again, curious, what is going on with Quanita these days? Like, I know, like maybe what is the water bringing you, transforming you, and
it's kicking my butt. It is.
Yeah, I know it is. Me too. But
oh my gosh, because we're all been, like I was saying, there's these 3 wisdom keepers who said we're not asked in this time to just like step up a step or grow a step. We're asked to like be raised an octave. And that's a lot of stretch and challenge and grief that needs to be let go of so that the new can come in. And what I'm finding is there's so many people right now who are in a lot of grief. In a 2-week period, about 3 weeks ago, I guess, in a 2-week period, there were 8 people that died that were connected to people that I know and am holding space for and with.
Wow.
And so it wasn't one-on-one relationship for me, but it was a one-off. And there was so much grief. I mean, there was a 30-year-old young man who was in a
Oof.
car accident. There
Mm.
was a 28-year-old young woman who was in a car accident
Oh,
who left a
young
4-year-old
people.
behind.
Oh
There was a
my goodness.
20-year-old, a
Oh
22-year-old
my
who took his
God.
own life.
Mm.
There's one of our fire and water peeps, her aunt died. There's another one whose brother died. There's a woman who I used to work with. We actually ran a company together and we worked for Public Allies together. Her dad died. I mean, it just
Oh.
like kept going, right? And so even though it wasn't a direct kind of relationship with me, they meant something to me. These people mean something to me. And so what I
Right.
found is after that 2-week period, I was in bed. I was sick. I got sick. Again, when I get congested, I know the congestion is grief for me. It's the grief trying to come out and it gets stuck in my body. And so I
Yeah.
know to be still and let it flow through me. I even will watch sad movies to make me cry to help help
Yeah,
that stuff
to
out,
release it.
right? Yes, to release it, to get rid of it, right? Like, I mean, and it was a lot. I was down for over a week. That hasn't happened in a long time.
Wow.
And so it's not just even our one-on-one stuff. It's the grief and the communities that we're holding. Like when I was in Brazil and I talked about getting sick and everyone in the community were trying to help and tend to
Mhm.
me. It's because it is all of ours, you know? And not that we take on there's a way where I think we try to take on other people's pain that isn't healthy. It's theirs, like to feel and to release. But there is a weight when there's that much around you that is the communal to hold. I
Yeah.
love that Sabangfu Somé, when she was alive, one of the things, she was from West Africa, Burkina Faso. One of the things that she said is that the wound happens in communities, so the healing has to happen there too.
Mm.
And so it's this piece about how are we holding it together. And I also think, one of the things that I talk about in that anger is unprocessed personal grief and rage is unprocessed communal grief, and they feel differently in the body. Anger feels different than rage,
Oh
and
yeah.
so to really get with that communal grief, and that we need, definitely then we need much more than just ourselves and holding it. Like we can't, it's too big for us by ourselves, even though I think, angers or that grief from even the level of anger, we need our community to hold space for us to be able to do that as well.
Hmm. Wow.
So I would say it's kicking my butt in that way. I'll also say that I've been really called to transform. Like I said, everything wants to be touched, including my business. We're looking at redoing the website,
Uh-huh.
redoing the logo. Everything is, it's like the transformation is requiring the new and
Yes.
listening for what it is. I'm getting really clear that Nazuzu is an educational and spiritual growth and development organization. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what does that mean to hold it in that way and to tend to a larger community? Who's needed to step in to help the holding of it? Because, there's a couple of us who've been doing it, and it's a call for what's the next layer.
It's true. So in Suzu is gonna remain, or it's gonna transform
Oh,
even with its name and
yes.
everything.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so Nazuzu will continue. Nazuzu's
Right.
um,
Everybody
she's a
can. It's like this,
yes,
right? Yeah.
yes. She's a
Everybody can
mermaid.
connect with
She's
that.
the story of
Yay.
Nazuzu was a Zimbabwe water spirit, and the story of Nazuzu is that when you're walking by a body of water, sometimes she'll grab you and pull you under. And because she's so beautiful, people think she's going to be all sweet and nice to start off with, but she's usually not. She makes you eat things like worms and dirt and fish heads. And then after a while,
I
if you're
love
obedient, she gives you access to the delicacies, to honey and rice. And then
Oh.
after a while, you get a mat and a basket of gifts that she floats you to the surface to go out in the world and do your own healing work. And so Nazuzu, for me, the story of Nazuzu is the story of transformation. The worms and dirt and fish head is all the wound stuff that we go through.
Mhm.
And if we're
Mhm.
obedient and we do our healing work, we get access to the delicacies, the sweetness of life. And then we can
Mhm.
use that to go out and heal the world.
I love it.
And, Nazuzu always says she found me instead of me finding her. I was in about 20 years ago, was in Atlanta's airport, and someone told me, don't take the tram, walk through. There's these sculptures that you should see. And one of them is water spirit Nazuzu. And
Mm,
so I came home to look up the story of Nazuzu, and that's how I got the name.
Wow, that is so amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
How they found you and how they send you
Yes.
messages, right?
Yes, and it's so interesting because I at first was working with a group of other people. We were running an organization called Be Vocal, Be Voices of Change and Leadership. And I decided it was time for me to move from what I saw as the codependence, because I wouldn't have started working on and doing my own business without them. And then I needed to step out into what at that point I thought was independence to then come back into an interdependent way. You know, now I think the whole idea of independence is actually a trauma response. There's no such thing. During the trauma, it makes us believe that the divine left us and then that we're responsible for our own survival. But I don't think that's true. And I think that we're all dependent. We're walking on the same earth, drinking the same water, breathing the same air. And so the question isn't whether we're independent or dependent. The question is what kind of dependence are we? So if we're sitting in scarcity and lack, it's codependence. If we're sitting in love and abundance, it's interdependence. But we're all dependents. Now we get to be individuals. We just don't get to be independent.
There is no way. You're right.
Yes.
We're all connected in some way.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. And any books coming up or anything else in that sense? Your last book was The Underground Railroad, right?
The Inner Railroad.
Inner Ground.
That is,
Railroad. Of course, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And what I'm working on now, we also have so Tennyson and I worked on years ago the Essence of Circle practice. So the Circle Way cards. And so I've been working on these cards that are racial healing essence cards. And so it's designed to look at how do we lean into being racial healing practitioners? What does it mean to take on our own? And what are the things that we've been teaching that aren't quite true? You know, I think we know just enough to be dangerous. So in some ways, it's like in our wanting to help and be helpful, we've talked a lot about things like people triggering each other, right? We'll say, you know, you did this and it triggered me. Well, what we forget sometimes in those spaces is triggers by definition are rooted in your past and not in the present moment. But we're using it as if you've triggered me, so you need to do something different. Well, that's not how triggers work. You know, so my thing is, if you're telling me that you were triggered, is that just do you want to just be witness? Because that's yours to clean up. That's not mine. You know, I can't know what every person's trigger is. But because we've created this whole idea of belonging through the wound, it's like you have to lead with the wound to be part of the group, to belong. You know, we have created this mess. We know just, like I said, we know just enough to be dangerous. And so what are those things that we've assumed that just aren't true? And part of it is because it's coming from such an adolescent adult culture. When you don't have initiated adults, you can't have initiated elders. And if you don't have initiated elders, you can't initiate the youth. So it becomes this vicious cycle of adolescent adults growing adolescent adults. So many of the conversations that we're having around these areas seem very adolescent to me.
Wow. And you're right. And that circle and that connection definitely needs to happen. I was interviewing also earlier today a young woman, 27 years old, and she's very connected to intergenerational relationships, and she's working into that, which is amazing, because to see someone so young in that generation and the reason she did that, because she was very connected to her grandmothers, and she understood, well, this is so important, I need to do something else. But then at the same time, she was questioning how much the young generations are not finding the spaces to make those connections, you know, with the elders, because nowadays it's not like we live in communities. Some of us we do, but not everybody, right? And that's kind of her mission, like how to generate those spaces where elders and youngs can meet with a common you know,
Yes.
even if it's let's make art, or let's read together, let's learn together, yeah, because
What what we
that
did
cycle is
when
not
our
good.
what we did when our kids were growing up is we actually had a
Mhm.
monthly potluck at our house. We called it First Fridays. My
Oh,
married name was Monday. First Fridays at the Mondays, and we invited people from our neighborhood, from our work, from our kids' schools, so from all parts of our life. And the people who were invited were told, you can bring somebody. You just bring a dish. And so we met lots of people at First Friday too, and it was just open to whoever showed up. And what I loved about First Friday is that everybody always knew when it was. First Friday of the month, you just show up. We didn't know if we were going to have 10 people or 30. And the kids, most of all, loved it. And we did First Friday for 7 years.
oh wow.
And there were times that First Friday would go, I wasn't in town, but people who, we had a couple regulars who would come and everything like that, and they would still host. They would help to host it. And it was a way that community from all layers. And I had parents who would say, my kids don't remember any other date on the calendar, but they remember First Fridays, because they got to come together and be in this communal gathering. And so it's not as hard. Sometimes I think we make it like we always want to create a program. Like we make it harder than it needs to be. Again, these like products that we have to have
There
instead
you
of
go.
invite people over for dinner, tell them bring a dish. And if there's too many desserts, you order a pizza. Like it's not,
That's it.
like you don't
Nothing,
have to
right?
do all of that, right?
As basic as that. Let's go back to basic and simple things. You're
Yes.
right. There
Yes.
you go. There you
And
go.
and I even think this, I was holding this concept of like when we start talking about cutting edge, often things that are cutting edge and kind of going, to this new layer really are just bringing us back to the center. It's bringing
Yeah.
us back to those basic principles in the center of what we stand for, what we want to do. And I'm always looking for what's the lightest touch.
Hmm.
You know, I do a circle immersion retreat, and it's in September, and it's a Wednesday evening through a Sunday afternoon. And one of the things that we do, it's rooted in the circle way, but it's also rooted with African principles and spirit medicine, because again, we need that component. And
Yeah.
I integrate them together. And we start off the first 2 days, 2.5 days are all about the energetics of circle. What does it feel like to be leaning in with each other and to going together? Because I want you to get in your system the feel of circle, so that then we talk about methodology second. We talk about, this is what you were feeling, this is what you were doing. Because I think we actually teach so many things backwards. We teach the methodology, and then what happens is it encourages people to imitate what they think is the right way instead of integrate what they've just done. And so when you get the feeling first and you're looking for the feeling, and I even say, okay, if it gets to the point where the methodology starts interrupting or getting in the way of connection, because connection is the main point, then ditch the methodology. like,
Right.
that you want to feel connected, you want to lean in together. And so we're a culture we do so much imitation instead of integration, because we're trying to get it right. And how do we take that? How do we first just like feel what it feels like and try to get more of that? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And really feel it and live it, but not
Yes.
imitate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Oh, this conversation has been so amazing. We can go on and on and on. It's like, okay, it's 7:10
Well,
already.
good.
I
Oh,
love it. Like I
it
said,
was
I
so
wanted
great.
Juanita just for me, so I can stay here forever and I don't realize what time it is. So yeah.
Well, I know this is the Grandmother's March, but one of the things I do believe is two people actually said this to me years ago, and I have it written in my boys' book, that we get it backwards. We think that men carry the power and women carry the love. But when we're at our best, it's just the opposite. Men show up with pure love. I'll serve until we find everybody who are lost from the landslide. I'll serve until, right? Women show up and they use their power when we're at our best. They're the ones in the village that you fish enough fish, it's time to stop. You chopped enough wood, it's time to stop. And so much in our culture, we as women have forgotten to carry our power, and the men have forgotten to carry their love.
It's true.
And, part of the power that we can use is to open spaces up. And one of the things that I'm offering this fall, it's not on my website yet, but we're figuring out dates for it, is I'm doing a Black Mama Medicine for Men retreat. And I'm inviting men to come and sit in circle with each other and be held by the feminine so that they can find each other in a way. I'm using my power to open the space, and I'm hoping that they will feel it with more love for each other than they thought was possible.
Oh,
So I want
wow.
people to kind of keep their eyes and ears open for that,
Yes. Yes.
and invite
And
the men
where
in your life to come.
I know. So,
Yes.
well, every man should come because they need this connection and they
Yeah.
need to feel that love because we know it's in there, like you
Yes.
said. But
Yes. Well,
oh
and I
my,
found such a wonderful retreat center for them in Hocking Hills. That's very much, it's a good man space to be in. There's lots of wood and metal and basketball net and all kinds of stuff,
well, then they
and
will
just
feel
beautiful in
connected.
nature too. Yeah.
Yes, and show up with
Yeah.
love. So where can they find this in the Zuzu as well?
So,
Website or
yes,
something?
yes, it'll be in
Yes.
thezuzu.com,
Okay.
and we're
Okay.
in the process, like I said, of securing the dates and stuff, and so we have a couple other things that'll be added to the list. Right now, there's only a couple things on the website, but we are looking for our online circle trainings that are coming, as well as the circle immersion that's already there. The Circle Way does have some funding for people who want to do the circle trainings, and
Mhm.
they have grant fundings that people can apply for that. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, so there is the website, so everybody
Yeah.
knows where can find Juanita and her amazing work. So
Well, thank you.
please do follow her and be part of this all initiatives, all amazing things that you do. I was part of
Thank
Fire and Water, and here I am,
Yes,
wanting more
I
and more.
love it. I love it.
And it's true. So yeah, I just can't thank you enough for
Oh, you're
this
so welcome.
space, for your wisdom, for your sharing. It's always so
Thank
much
you.
fun, and I so much learning from you. So
Yeah,
thank
thank
you
you.
really.
Thank you
Yes,
very
and
much for the
yeah, yeah.
invitation.
Oh, thank you,
Until
and
next year.
until next year,
Yeah.
because now you're part of this. Yeah.
Yes. I'm
There is no
in.
way out. Now that you're in,
Yes,
like, there is no way out.
yes,
We just keep changing in cycles, like you say, different cycles,
definitely,
but you're part of my journey in this.
definitely.
So thank you. We're in this together. And thanks everybody for watching us. Keep following Juanita and to the next Grandma's March.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.